Hey everybody, welcome to the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell. On the other end of the line is Jake Burns, which I'll get to in a second. But first, we got to tell you who's sponsoring the podcast. We're once again, for another month, being sponsored by the fine folks at Minuteman Tickets. They're locally owned in Columbus. You can call Scott and Matt. That's the best way. Look on the website, minutemantickets.com. minutemantickets.com, and then pick up the phone and call them 614-943-3000. That's 614-943-3000. That's the easiest and best way. Talk to real live people, save money on fees. If you have any kind of an issue, they posted about one of their customer service stories this week where somebody bought tickets and then the tickets didn't show up, and Scott and Matt made it good. They gave two tickets to make up for it that were even better than the ones that were lost in the mail. That's what you get when you call Minuteman Tickets, that real, actual, friendly customer service. So please support the people who support us. Now let's talk about some football and whatnot. How's it going, Jake?
Hey, it's good, my man. I just settling in here for the night. Cut some basketball on here as we talk Browns. Couldn't be better on my end. How's it for you?
Good. And it's been a while it's probably been about 3 months since you and I have talked about stuff. And before we get to sports, like real life things happened for you. New dad, and not the easiest transition home.
No, yeah, it's a pretty wild story. I mean, it's pretty common for a lot of folks who go through the NICU journey, but we had our little man Porter 33 weeks, so pretty early, about a month and a half early. Ironically, yesterday was his actual due date. We had him on February 4th, and he was up there at the NICU at Riverside here in Columbus, Ohio for 21 days. Did really well. I can't speak highly enough of how he was handled up there. The nurses, and they're just heroes, and did really well. He did well home with us, so we're getting into a new routine. We just moved last weekend to a new place here in Columbus, so it's been a wild ride. So yeah, any break I can get right now to talk some football is very welcome.
You did that way out of order, dude. You're supposed to move before the baby shows up.
No kidding, man. It was wild. We're not really settled where we want to live long term, so I don't want to buy a home yet. So we're still doing a little bit of the townhome thing for a while. We actually want to move up toward Cleveland at some point, but that's another story, not here nor there. But we'll the place we were at wanted to refurbish the place we were in, so they kind of told us you have 2 months to go. And the day before they gave us the 2 month notice, they were like, that was the day before we went into the hospital. So it was trying to find a place simultaneously having a child. It was one of the crazier 2 month stretches of our lives.
Makes even the Cleveland Browns and their process look normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about it. Obviously, we have to talk about the quarterbacks. I almost said we have to talk about the Cleveland Browns. We have to talk about the quarterbacks tonight because that is pretty much where we're all headed. Since we last talked, the Jets made a big trade, and basically the way it stands now, the Browns have no choice but to take whichever guy they think is their number one quarterback first. Is that kind of your stance at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was that way before these trades, but like you said, Craig, it's a given now, or an absolute lock that they have to. It's not to say the Giants aren't taking a quarterback, or the Giants won't trade out of that spot to somebody such as Buffalo or Denver, who's eager for their quarterback as well. That's certainly plausible, but it's very likely that either the Giants are taking a quarterback or they're trading with somebody who is, and we're looking at the top 3 picks or quarterbacks. So the outside theory of take best player available, number 1 overall, and then get your quarterback at 4 seems to be out the window. So they absolutely have to take their guy at 1.
And there is a chance, and I think I might even agree with the prospect that there is a best player available who is not a quarterback. But the importance of that quarterback position makes it so that it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, positional, that's an interesting debate that I like having is a quarterback that important that he is if he's on the fringe of being that best player available, that pushes him over the top. There's no doubt that having the right quarterback is the most valuable position. So it does trump it to a degree. So you're right. And a lot of people don't seem to be able to establish a difference between saying this guy's the best football player, but this guy's the most important position. So I think the best teams in the NFL align their values of best football player, most important position, and they kind of try to meet in the middle. So that's why you see a lot of quarterbacks pushed up the board who you wouldn't regularly see.
Now, hypothetically, let's say you're John Dorsey and you've been doing this a long time and you feel very confident in your skills looking at these quarterbacks and deciding what their ceilings are and what kind of player they can ultimately be. And let's just say that you think that the top end of this quarterback class is like, you know, Blake Bortles or the guy who plays for the Dolphins, Tannehill.
Yeah.
What are you doing then? Are you still taking the best possible shot at a franchise quarterback, or do you go to plan B?
It's a good question. I think that they would have to, like you said, if Dorsey felt that way, and this draft had somebody such as Myles Garrett, that everybody as a consensus feels that that's the number one player at a position of otherwise importance, I think that they would consider taking that other player. There's just not a guarantee. I mean, there's Bradley Chubb and there's Saquon Barkley who people and Quentin Nelson, the guard out of Notre Dame, who people feel are elite prospects in this class, but they don't put them with the prospect or the idea of aligning them with the first overall pick as the situation you're explaining, even if the quarterback they don't feel is that much of a franchise quarterback, or he's a fringe franchise quarterback, such as the names you mentioned, Tannehill, those guys who you're not quite sure, but you're taking the risk on them anyway. If this were a draft where the Browns maybe only had one selection in the first round, that would be something to consider. I think since they have two, they can not only answer their quarterback position with the guy they feel is best, but they can also still, in the first four picks, or there'd only be two other players selected before them, they still feel like they can get a really good player at that, I guess, non-quarterback spot. So I think that this draft, with them having two picks so early, even if this pick from Houston was a little bit later, was maybe even around the 12 to 15 range, they might consider changing where they're at stylistically. But since they're both in the top five, I feel that they really are going to align with the idea of, even if we don't feel like, for example, the hot name right now is Sam Darnold. Even if we feel like Sam Darnold's ceiling isn't elite franchise quarterback, we feel like in a draft class here that has pretty good quarterbacks, we can take him, feel good about getting that position, having a chance to have that position answered, but still getting a really good player at 4 that we would have just normally gotten had we had just one first-round pick, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Do you think there's a quarterback in this draft that projects to someday be top 5 in the NFL?
I call me crazy, but I think there are 3. I think there's the idea of the top 3 guys that I've really liked all year, and it could be 4. It depends on situations for Lamar. But I've had all year Baker Mayfield's my top guy. Now, each of these 3 carry questions, but I think sometimes we get swept away with the questions so much as what the solutions are on the field for these guys. There are 3 that I really like. I've had Baker as QB1 all year. There's a wide variety of reasons we'll probably talk about later why I think that. Then I think Josh Rosen and I think Sam Darnold are guys that can be top 5 players at the position at some point in their career. And then there's Lamar Jackson too, who I think if he goes to the right situation, you'll hear a lot of people who study the NFL mention the Houston type situation where the offense is aligned with their skill set perfectly. He can be a really good football player too. There's no denying his skill set. So those are the 4 guys. I think 3 for sure. A 4th guy is on the fringe if he goes to the right situation. Then your other guy that you hear a lot of people talk about is Josh Allen. I don't agree with it. I don't align with it, but I also understand where some of the people who are saying that come from with his skill set. But to me, just to answer that question personally, I think there are 3 for sure.
See, now this is one of the things that I did want to talk about today, and it's the idea that these guys as prospects, their path is somehow determined the day that they're prospects and before they're actually drafted. And this is one of the things that I think we all need to remember about the Browns and whoever they take, is that if this team hasn't turned over a new leaf with John Dorsey and with their philosophy on stability and not turning over coaching staff, they're almost guaranteed to fail. Even if they pick the best guy and we all agree it's the best guy, they're going to fail another quarterback. Like, these things aren't predetermined, other than bad organizations end up failing out players at a higher rate than stable organizations. It's back to that question of, would Ben Roethlisberger have become Ben Roethlisberger if the Browns had drafted him? And so I think, like, I'm not afraid for the Browns to draft that quarterback, but I know that there's more to it than just drafting the right guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually tweeted something out about that today, saying, I can understand the rationale for wanting Sam Darnold first, but I'm not sure that I trust the situation. And that's a fair concern, because are we sure that Hugh Jackson on the hot seat, without a doubt, is on the hot seat here in his situation? Are we sure that if things get tough week 5, week 6, Tyrod's not quite playing as well as we hoped he would, that he's not going to thrust he's not going to thrust Sam Darnold or Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield into the line of attack here? And like you said, it rushes the process, it rushes everything, and it leaves plenty to be, I guess, concerned with. The big thing I always say about quarterbacks is, you could take two guys with identical skill sets, send them to different organizations, and get completely different results from them. And you're getting that from the Browns, as against, like you said, with the Roethlisberger example, for Pittsburgh. So it gets really interesting. I understand the hesitation for a quarterback at 1, and I have concerns about if they're going to actually be patient with Sam Darnold, who is a kid at 20 years old. I think needs to have plenty of time to progress into his best version of a football player within the league. And are they going to have that patience? I'm not sure. And I don't think anybody can say that with certainty. You can look at Sam Darnold and picture where he could be in 2 years, but do we know for a fact that Hugh Jackson, Todd Haley aren't going to become desperate? They start 1-4 and decide, after Sam Darnold lights up a couple preseason games against the second and third team, that he doesn't need to be put in the field. And all of a sudden you got a situation where we all roll our eyes and say, here we are again. Here's Tim Couch 2.0. So, that's fair, and that's a concern that I understand. But I mean, I'm still to the point where I think they have to take a guy. They have to try. I mean, you just have to try to answer that position. Whether we think that there are a lot of factors that could lead them to screwing it up, there's no denying that. And if a Browns fan tries to deny that, they're just being a homer. They're not seeing what has been the history that has played out here. So I get it. I understand. I think it's a fair concern, but I also think they just have to keep trying to figure it out.
Well, and if there's anything that gives you a little bit of hope for that, I mean, John Dorsey comes in here and he did get fired by the Chiefs, but he's coming off a situation where he had Alex Smith. He went out and he got kind of an Alex Smith level of starter in Tyrod Taylor, but during that time when he had Alex Smith, he had Pat Mahomes, who he drafted 10th overall, and he was content to kind of let him wait in the wings.
Yeah, I think that's what they'll have to be. I think that they'll have to all sit at the table in Berea and come to the understanding that it has to be with Jimmy at the table, with Hugh at the table, and with John Dorsey at the table, and say, we're not playing this kid flat out, no matter the situation this year, unless we all sit here and we look at the tape together and determine that this kid is actually ready, and we come to a consensus. And I think that, like you said, the good part here is that John Dorsey is not Hugh and he's not Jimmy. He actually understands winning pedigrees coming from Kansas City and coming from Green Bay, that he wouldn't force that kind of action. So I think there is a little bit of hope, like you said, for a guy like John Dorsey who took Mahomes and understands the patience. He was in Green Bay when Brett Favre was playing. They understood the patience that was needed for their guy, Aaron Rodgers, to finally hit the field. I think that he brings the right mindset. Elliott, Wolf, obviously, Alonzo Highsmith, those guys have seen it. They know what it is. They're not going to rush this kid. And that does give us that little sliver of hope that they know what it's going to take, and they're going to, the second Hugh Jackson comes in a panic and says, we're playing Sam Darnold, he's just going to flat out tell him no. So that's the hope.
Well, and if you've listened to the Tomahawk podcast and you've heard Andrew Hawkins and Joe Thomas talk about the Johnny Manziel thing, they needed an adult in the room back then to stick with Brian Hoyer. Not that Brian Hoyer was going to all of a sudden become Tom Brady because he studied under Tom Brady, but because he was the veteran. He was the guy who understood the offense. And yeah, he was playing awful. He was playing horribly. He probably earned a benching, but he was still their best option. And if they'd had more long-term thinking to protect the team and Johnny Manziel and the team from Johnny Manziel, they never would have made that move. And you just have to hope that with the trio of Dorsey, Highsmith, and Wolf, that they've kind of turned that corner. And I think even with Hugh Jackson, now that he's got that offensive coordinator, I think it alleviates some of the responsibility for those things. That's what delegation is supposed to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Hugh Jackson has understood that if I want to be a head coach here, I have to fall in line with what everybody thinks is the best solution for the situation. I think I've seen some things from Hugh this offseason that I didn't expect, that I've been impressed by. He did hire an offensive coordinator. It seems as though he's turned the reins over to him. He's taken a step back. He's letting other people, get a bigger voice in the quarterback decisions, all of those things that I think my big point here is that I think Hugh is going to fall in line because he wants to be here long term and he wants to be a part of the solution. And I think he's kind of come to the understanding that maybe this isn't going to be my way. I need to fall in line with some of these guys who they have brought in who have wanted other places. And that gives me a little bit of a peace of mind. There's less on his plate. There's more personnel decisions being made by people who have garnered the respect of people around the league to make those personnel decisions. So, it gives me a little bit of peace of mind. I think that without a doubt, Hugh is going to, if he's having those feelings of playing the young player, whoever they select, he's going to know that, hey, I need to talk to John, I need to talk to Elliot, I need to talk to these guys to figure out if this is the right plan, and they'll make a sound decision. It's not going to be the Ray Farmer, Mike Pettin, inexperienced types that are just saying, hey, man, pull the trigger, let's do this because it's what the fans want. I don't think these guys could care less what the fans want. They know the process by which it takes to win football games, and they're going to do what is necessary, the long path, the long vision to get them there. And that's not to say that the regime before didn't obviously take the long path. I think we know we've been on the long path, but I don't think that John Dorsey is going to come in here and try to solve it all in year one. I think that they're going to have a longer vision at play here. How do we work this out long term, kind of thing?
Well, and I think it is what the fans want. The fans want to see the team win. And so often the fans, I think, have felt like, well, if we can't get wins, I at least want the satisfaction of seeing so-and-so benched. And that pound of flesh has done the fan base no good whatsoever. All right, we did have one person chime in from Twitter with a question. Would you stay at 4 and take Barkley or Chubb, or would you trade down for a bounty?
Fair question. I think there are going to be people who jump on both sides of that fence. The obvious side says, I don't want to trade down again. We've done this too many times. What's the point of taking more young players when we're trying to get older? John Dorsey has clearly aligned a plan of, hey, we're trying to get the middle class type players back into this organization, those middle-aged guys who are on their second contract now. So I understand that side, that they don't want to trade down. It's all a matter, Craig, of what's there at 4. If they get to 4 and they see that Bradley Chubb is gone and they don't feel like they should take a running back, they don't feel like they should take Saquon Barkley, it is completely possible that trading down to 5 with Denver and letting Denver come get their quarterback, or trading to 12 with Buffalo is plausible and would make some sense. If you feel like you can go to 12 and still get whoever you want, whether that's Denzel Ward as a corner or Jair Alexander from Louisville, the other corner, the top 2 corners on pretty much everybody's board, if you feel like you can move to 12 and get that solution still, I'm okay with that. It's a risk that they probably shouldn't take right now, but I would understand. But I'd make sure I get back from Buffalo, like you said, the word bounty. They need to get back 12, 22, probably a third-round pick back, and then maybe next year's first. They got to really make Buffalo pay because Buffalo is very desperate. So I would understand. I'm of the view of I don't want to be right about these things. I try to see where they're coming from, and I would understand that selection. But I also really, really expect them to just sit at 4 and take a player there because they need the high-end players. I think they feel like even if they took Barkley, although the running back value question is one that's interesting, and I get it, I would understand why they would take him because they want playmakers at the top end of the draft, and that's what they've been sitting at that position for. So I would prefer they sit still, draft a player at 4, but I would certainly understand if they bump back to 5 with Denver, bump back to 7 with Tampa. If Tampa wanted to jump up and take Derwin James, Minkah Fitzpatrick, somebody like that, or if they bump back to 12 and took a haul from the Bills. So, yeah, I think that answers it. I'd understand it, but I prefer they stay put.
Yeah, I would understand it too. I also prefer they stay put and just add 2 guys. After they add 2 guys in the top 5, if they want to trade every other pick in the rest of the draft for future stuff, I'm fine with that. There's an NFL team can only handle so much turnover from one year to the next, and with the number of veterans that they've brought in, if they add too many rookies in the draft, it's going to be counterproductive. It's going to cause them to get rid of players that need another year to mature that were drafted previously, or it's too many new faces. And at some point, any team can't justify a certain level of turnover. I don't know what the magic number is, but the Browns are dangerously close to it already, and they haven't drafted a single player yet.
Yeah, we talked about this actually the last time you and I got together for this pod. We had talked about.
Did we? Because I forgot.
Yeah. I did a study on how many. I mean, the Chiefs, or sorry, not the Chiefs, but the Eagles, Jacksonville, and St. Louis, or they're not St. Louis, they're LA now, but the Rams had all went through a 2-year turnaround. Each team had upwards of at least 20 players from 2 years prior. This year's Browns team only had 8 players from the start of the 2015 season to this point. From the end of the 2015 season to the start of this year. So that speaks to how much change had happened. And now, like you said, if they go through even more change, that would kind of defeat the purpose of getting a lot of cohesion that they've had with this younger group. So I get where Dorsey's coming from with bringing in the older players he's brought in here, some of the mid-20s players. But, we can't keep adding too many more young players, because then it's like you said, it's doing the same thing over again with the roster turnover, and you're going to look back in 2 years and we're going to say, well, we only have 12 players from, the end of the 2017 season, and here we are again, 4-12. So they have to keep some cohesion, and I think that they have the appropriate number of draft picks now. That they almost had. I hate to say it because it sounds weird. They almost had too many. You can only get so young. You can only take so many players. And I figured they were going to package them in some way to either move up for a guy, but it's okay to use those picks to get veteran proven players too. So it makes some sense to kind of sit in the middle ground here.
Yeah, if they packaged the rest of their draft to add a first rounder, I would be totally fine with that. They need to either punt some of these assets to the future, and I'm not talking about the first 2 picks, the number 1 and number 4, but they need to punt some of these assets to the future or consolidate them, because I don't know how many, I didn't count the latest, but they still have 5 before the end of the second round.
Yeah, I believe they have 9 total.
That's so many players.
It is. It absolutely is. That's why I still keep the idea that they're going to take 33 and 35 and move back in and do another late first round trade, like they did last year to have 3 first round picks overall. I think we see that still in play, because the Carlos Hyde running back answer is something I think we're kind of underestimating. I think they take a running back, but I think they use one of those picks that's one of the ones that's not of the 5 in the first 64 picks. So I think that they'll probably end up bringing in 7 players from this draft class total, and that's probably about right.
So how did you feel about the Carlos Hyde signing? Because I felt like there was almost a slow playing it by the Browns fan base, because people didn't want to overrate it because he was a Buckeye.
Yeah, I mean, I like Carlos Hyde. I think he does some things fairly well. I saw some good numbers that he runs really well from the gun. He's almost a 2 more yards per carry player from the gun. The Browns were top 3 in the league in shotgun snaps last year. I'm not sure if that'll stay the same in Todd Haley's offense, but I do know Pittsburgh with Roethlisberger was in the gun quite often. So I do expect them to get in the gun, help Tyrod Taylor out in terms. Buffalo is a lot of under center with Tyrod. I think he'll be a better shotgun quarterback. I expect them to do a lot of that downhill stuff with Carlos Hyde. If you remember at Ohio State, he was really effective inside zone. I can't remember watching a running back, and this includes Ezekiel Elliott, who I thought was a really obviously talented college football player, but Carlos Hyde was 5 yards inside zone every time he touched the ball at Ohio State. It was like clockwork. And I think that's where he's best used. The 49ers put him under center, put their quarterback under center, and did a lot of that stuff with him, and he just doesn't do as well from that angle. So I think he'll be better here. I think he's okay. I think he's a slight improvement over Isaiah Crowell. I think he could get to 1,100, 1,200 yards if they give him enough carries. It's a good signing. It's a good veteran guy who plays hard. Respect to the people that'll be in the locker room. Respect to the fans. The fans will like the name. It's a win. I thought it was a win all around. I didn't see a negative to bringing him in, even if they brought in a rookie such as Darius Geis or somebody in late round 2, Rashad Penny, Royce Freeman type player. I think it's a smart move. It's a veteran at that position who they feel like has a little bit more game breaking ability than Isaiah Crowell did down the field. So good signing overall. Not going to change the outcome of very many games next year, but he's just going to be a little bit better player, and that's okay if you can upgrade that.
You know what else I noticed is that in 2017, obviously with Kyle Shanahan, Carlos Hyde became a much, much more serious pass threat. Like not big time, but they used him. They targeted him 88 times. He caught 59 balls. And that was more than he'd had in all the other 3 seasons combined.
Yeah, I think that's something he's worked hard at when he was coming out of Ohio State. That was a big knock on Carlos, was his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He struggled with it early in his career out there, but he had a really good year with it last year. I expect them to do. I mean, when Todd Haley sees the exact number you just said, he's targeted 88 times. Yes, 59, 60 catches. His mind probably goes to, this could be somebody I use just like I use Le'Veon. And I'm sure that was something that Todd Haley was pounding the table about, and it'll be something that, if they can have Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde kind of doing similar things, I think Duke's obviously going to be a better, more gifted pass catcher, better getting open in one-on-one situations. But Carlos brings a better run element, a toughness in between the tackles. That's good too. I think they're going to be interchangeable, those two, and I think that's why I don't expect them to take a running back in the first 3 rounds. So I like it. I just think it was a good signing.
It's interesting. While you were talking, I decided to check out the game log, and Hyde actually caught more balls in the first half of the season when guys like Brian Hoyer were playing than he did after Jimmy Garoppolo took over.
Yeah, and Tyrod Taylor is, if you pay attention to what Buffalo people say about Tyrod Taylor, he's a heavy check down guy, and that's okay.
So you're saying he's more Brian Hoyer than Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think we have, I like Todd Haley, what he's been able to get out of his guys, but I think Kyle Shanahan's one of the more gifted play callers in the NFL. But I think that it's going to be a pretty hand in glove fit with those running backs, him and Duke getting the ball out of the backfield in the passing game quite a bit, and being asked to make something happen, make one guy miss to get those first downs. So yeah, I would certainly say Tyrod is more of a Brian Hoyer than Garoppolo for sure. But it'll work out. I have a good feeling it'll work out for the best for all of those guys, because it gives him 2 options underneath in the running back position that he'll feel comfortable about getting the ball to, and they can make something happen.
All right, so I know the draft board is the draft board, and you are going to be really strict with it. You're going to take the best player available. But if the draft board could fall perfectly for Jake Burns, how would it fall in the top 5? Yeah,
I think if they can take their quarterback, I'm fine with any of those 3 names.
No, you.
I would take Baker Mayfield. I think he's at a level right now that the other 2 hope to get to from an efficiency standpoint and what he can do within an offense. So I would take him at first. I believe in him. I know that there are people that don't believe in him, and I certainly understand the Browns wanting somebody who they feel more comfortable with off the field, but that's my selection. And then I think that the Giants take a quarterback. I think obviously the Jets are going to take a quarterback. They're probably going to see Darnold. You would see Darnold and Rosen go in those scenarios. And then you would see, your 4th pick, you're going to have your choice of either Bradley Chubb or you're going to have Saquon Barkley. And I would take Bradley Chubb. I feel like if you have Bradley Chubb, 275-pound defensive end who can still use speed, and you have Myles Garrett with Emmanuel Ogbah, you have some really, really interesting pass rush combos. Myles Garrett had 3 sacks when he bumped down inside to a 5 technique playing off of the guard. It's almost unfair when you see that happen in games last year. They would do a lot of slide fronts and bring down an outside linebacker to face the tackle, and Myles would move inside and he would just annihilate interior offensive linemen. And that they can keep doing that. I mean, you want to have in the NFL, you obviously you put a very key onus on your pass defense, but you're getting after the quarterback. The best teams in the NFL get after the quarterback, and the Browns didn't. They were dead last year in pressures created. So Bradley Chubb fits the mold right there. So that'd be my top 4, and then the 5th pick would be Denver. They would probably take what's left at the quarterback spot, which is Josh Allen. So that's my top 5.
When you're looking at the Browns and their needs assessment, obviously after they take the quarterback first, if you're over the best cornerback, over the best safety, over the best defensive back, you're going pass rush.
Yeah, I think that I think if there was a better corner available, a la Jalen Ramsey, I think if there was somebody, or Marshawn Lattimore, like Denzel Ward is a really good one-on-one corner, but he's undersized. He's 5'10", 180, which is pretty small. Which is pretty small within NFL standards, covering wide receivers on the outside. And I think Minkah Fitzpatrick didn't test quite as well as we wanted him to. So his testing wasn't as elite as we hoped it would be. He's told people he prefers to play slot corner. It would be a position switch for him anyway to end up at safety, and the Browns traded, obviously, to get a free safety already. So I just don't see where they need somebody as bad as they need to create pass pressures like they do, and Bradley Chubb aligns with being an elite prospect. So I think it makes sense from all angles.
I'm wary of any player who outwardly has a preference like that and is going to be so verbal with it.
Yeah, no. Are you talking about Minkah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't like the interview. I mean, I get it. Sometimes these guys are just going to say whatever comes, but you got to say, I'm willing to play wherever they want me to play. If they want me to play corner, boundary corner, I'll play corner. They want me to play free safety. Don't limit yourself. Don't say you prefer to. Just, I don't know. That's what I loved about, or still love about Jalen Ramsey, is you just, any challenge you have, throw it at me. But yeah, the first time I started to work away from Minkah as the 4th pick was when I read that piece about him saying he prefers to play slot corner. I mean, like, he's a smart guy. He's very cerebral. Nick Saban has said as much. He has to know that the value of a slot corner in the NFL, while it is high, it is not top 10 pick in the draft high. The Browns solved it with Ryan Bodie Calhoun as a free agent, as you know. You just have to know that. Maybe his agent didn't tell him I don't know there, but I didn't. That rubbed me the wrong way for what the position need is there at the 4th pick, and the trade kind of pushed me over the top as well.
So I haven't talked to you since the trades. In one of my posts last week, I kind of criticized a couple of the trades. I didn't think the Browns got anything for Danny Shelton, and I also thought that while the Browns did get value for DeShone Kizer, I found it strange that they dealt a player in a position that important after very little time, getting a chance to mold him when there's a new offensive coordinator coming in. What was your take on those trades?
I didn't mind. I didn't mind the Kizer trade because for a multitude of reasons. I absolutely understand what you're saying about investing a 2nd-round pick into a kid, and it just felt like it's almost like they used him up and they just wanted to get rid of him.
It felt like something that a previous regime would have done, just wash a guy out. And yeah. I expected different from John Dorsey on something like that.
I absolutely did too. I just didn't see them. I thought he would be okay to still compete and let the kid grow. So I didn't necessarily understand that. I didn't feel like they did right by DeShone Kizer playing him as early as they did, letting him take the fall, letting Hugh Jackson kind of beat him up a little bit in press conferences, and then shipping him off. I don't know. You're right. I'm with you on it. It rubbed me the wrong way. They, like you said, they did get good value for him. I think Demarius Randall is going to be a player for the Browns. I think he's going to be a pretty good free safety. But that whole situation I did not enjoy. They got more back for him than I anticipated, but I just kind of feel for the kid. I don't know. I don't know why I feel for him, but I do. I felt like he was put in way before his time should have been, and he was used up, and then it felt like we just spit him out. But it is a cutthroat business, I suppose. But you're right. It felt like something a regime previous would have done, just because it was what the somebody told them was the right thing to do, an analytic driven thing or something. It felt weird. I'm with you. But then the Danny Shelton trade was probably the only one that I didn't like. I went back and forth with quite a few people on. It feels like Danny Shelton gets a bad rap from Browns fans because he's not a backfield disruptor, but that's not what they drafted him for. They originally drafted him as a 3-4 nose tackle. His rookie year, he was really bad, and that's what a lot of people remember. But if you watch Danny Shelton the past 2 years as a one-tech in a 4-3 defense, a one-tech, you're aligning on the inside eye of the play side guard to the strength call side. So offensive formations have a strength call one way or the other. Your one tech is going to go to the strength side. He's going to be aligned on the inside eye, almost a shade with his inside shoulder on the outside shoulder of the center, if that makes sense. But he's going to be an interior player for you. And I thought Danny Shelton the last 2 years was really good, taking up two defenders and still making run plays in his gap assignment. And I mean PFF grade. I know Pro Football Focus gets wide variety of reviews, but on film, I thought he did a really good job of his assignment, still making plays, that kind of thing, but also controlling blockers to keep them off of linebackers. I mean, Joe Scobert and Christian Kirksey were in the top 5 in the NFL in tackles, so somebody's eating blocks, and I know that's not just him, but I thought he did a really good job of it. Now, the argument is if they're trying to go to a quicker front with defensive tackles who create more interior pressure, of the Larry Ogunjobi model, I get that. That's a philosophical change. That's fine. I understand. But I was really upset with people saying he wasn't good. Like, that's not true. He was good at what he was asked to do. Now, is Danny going to be a 5-sack defensive tackle? And I don't think anybody's going to lie to you and say that, but he's really good at the job he was given. So I thought the Patriots got a steal. I didn't think they got enough back for him. Essentially getting I think it was a 4th round pick, but it's essentially a 5th round pick because the Patriots are going to be a top 5 team in the league record wise. So that's the one I didn't like. I did like the trade for Jarvis Landry. I know that trade, people complain about yards per catch and he's not a great athlete, but the guy catches the football. He controls the middle of the field. You talk to anybody who we talked to Nam in our group here, Jeffrey Nami, about, he's a Dolphins fan. And I have another good Dolphins fan I went to college with, and they hated seeing him go. I think that if you talk to a fan base and they hate seeing a player go, I think that's just as important as what a Pro Football Reference page tells you about how many yards per catch. It tells you how important a guy is to a team, and they hated seeing him leave, especially only giving up what we gave up, which was a 4th round, or I think a 4th round pick for him. And then I think the Tyrod gamble with a 3rd round pick is just fine, whether they keep him long term or not. Anytime you can go into free agency in the draft season with your starting quarterback already decided, it's welcome. It's welcome, especially in Cleveland, and you can't really put a price on that. And the 3rd round pick is certainly reasonable.
Yeah, I understood trading Danny Shelton. I know that he wasn't going to be a long-term part of the Browns' plan. I just felt like they sold low. They just sold low, and they gave him away for nothing. And I thought that undersold, even if he's not a good fit, that undersold his value to somebody else in a different scheme.
It just felt like a typical Patriots trade too, where they take a guy who a fan base doesn't believe in, and they are going to turn him into he'll be a fan favorite there. I have no doubt we'll watch the Patriots in a year or two, and he's making plays against the run, and we're saying, what the heck, it's just I've already braced for it.
Yeah, he'll be really good at the one thing that they want him to do, and they won't ask him to do anything that he's not supposed to be able to do. You're exactly right.
Yeah, it's why they went. I mean, not saying that this group wouldn't have tried to figure out a way to use him right, but the philosophical change the Browns can't give up established players, and Danny was an established player at a specific thing in the NFL, and they don't have enough of that. And I didn't agree with it. I was very vocal about not agreeing with it. I was vocal in favor of the other trades, but I think when trades happen that you don't agree with, it's okay to say why. Why did you give up this player on a team so defunct of talent already? You give up somebody this important to their overall middle class, and and get back so little? So I think that's a fair question to ask.
Dude, it's one of the funniest things about Browns fans, and I pointed that out the minute he was traded. Just how quickly everybody turns on a guy. This fan base, especially the ones on Twitter, are full of just apologists looking for reasons to find out why the Browns are doing everything right. And they've got a new hero in town. His name is John Dorsey. I like John Dorsey. I think he's the most qualified person they've had in this position probably since 1999 and maybe even before then. But get a hold of yourselves. The dude is not going to do everything right, and he deserves to have a little bit of criticism here and there when he makes a move that we don't agree with or that we think is a little bit off or undervalued, and that was the Danny Shelton move. Danny Shelton was not worthless. He they threw him away for nothing.
Yeah, no, that's spot on about John Dorsey. He is certainly the most qualified guy we've had in nearly 20 years, like you said, for that specific position within the organization. But there's no doubt he didn't do some. There's a reason he's not in Kansas City anymore. He didn't do everything right there. He's not going to do everything right here. We just have to hope that he does the things he does right here are of the higher importance than players like Danny Shelton. So we just have to hope. But you're certainly spot on with the fan base turning on. I mean, I couldn't tell you. All I did was simply tweet out I didn't think he had gotten enough value for Danny Shelton, who was really good at his job. And I had at least 30 people arguing with me about how good Danny. I'm like, what are we doing? I mean, I don't even know. Is it the first round pick thing we have? We expect people to be. This fan base has wild expectations because they just haven't seen first round picks pan out into much of anything. So if Danny Shelton is kind of just par for the course for a mid first round pick, then that's okay. But they expect the world out of these guys. I mean, it's a battered fan base. They're all over the board.
So we got to stay above the fray somehow, some way.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough for the. I get it. Everybody's disgruntled, and you wanted Danny Shelton to be something more than what he was. But you had to understand who the guy was when he came into the league. You have to. There's so much in life is about expectations. You have to know what to expect out of players, and if you actually kind of sit down and study what Danny was brought in to do and how he did it the last few years, you'll see that he was doing his job. So, just because they traded away a player doesn't mean you have to sit here and say, I justify it. John Dorsey traded him. It's justifiable because he wasn't that good. No, it's okay to say, I don't really think this makes a ton of sense. And it's okay to question a guy. And there's a lot of just trust Dorsey. Well, I haven't seen John Dorsey do anything yet that makes me trust him. I mean, I know they haven't played any games yet, but I got it. He's got to earn our trust before I just say, well, I'm going to trust him.
Well,
so
he cut Kenny Britt. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. That's probably what has everybody hooked, and that had me hooked. I don't say that much.
I keep having to use my cough button because I'm sick, but man, it's talking Browns football with you makes 40 minutes fly by very, very, very quickly. Let's try not to make it another 3 months till we talk again.
Yeah, let's do it. We could do one right before the draft or any of it, man. I'm always game. It's I know we got a little bit of hectic schedules. You've been all over the board lately. I've been all over the board, but hopefully things settle in. We can get together one or two more times before the draft.
Awesome stuff. That's Jake Burns. I'm Craig Lindell. We want to again thank Minuteman Tickets out of Columbus. Call Scott and Matt for all your ticket needs, if I can get these words out of my throat. MinutemanTickets.com, 614-943-3000. Pick up the phone, call them. That's the best way. 614-943-3000. I'm debating whether I go all out this year and I get those Smashing Pumpkins tickets. I haven't seen that band since like the Melancholy tour. They played I guess it was called Gund Arena at the time, and the band Garbage opened up. It makes me feel like a very old man, but Smashing Pumpkins are kind of getting back together minus one member, so I think I have to go. I might have to call Minuteman Tickets, 614-943-3000. That's it for us. Thanks for listening. Tell a friend, leave a rating, click that button on iTunes and give us the good rating. Until next time, it's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.